Hello, it is April here in Phoenix, and as you can see behind me, the roses are starting to bloom here. They look very beautiful. I'm very happy with them. And in today's video, I do want to take you through a little walkthrough, a spring blooming time walkthrough in my rose garden. And in my last video that I posted, it was winter time and I was prepping the rose garden for spring. And so I kind of wanted to focus a little bit on how I pruned back the roses in that video versus how they look now. So if you are interested on how I prep my garden over the winter with all of the hard cutbacks and everything, please do check out that video. You can see it's a big change, obviously, from winter till now. I will link it below. And in this video, I'm going to show you how they turned out, how they're looking, how they're blooming. And I did want to mention, if you do like my shirt, it has a beautiful rose on it, long sleeve rash guard. I do have this up on my Etsy shop. I will also link that below for you. This rose that I have on my print is actually Don Juan from my garden. He's back there somewhere. And I made him into a really pretty print, and I do like it. So if you are interested, again, the link will be below. So here we have some really lovely blooming roses back here in my rose garden. This reddish, coralish, smoky one is called Hot Cocoa. It's a really nice floribunda. It's one of the newer floribundas in my yard. It has a nice coloring. It's got, the flowers are a little bit smaller on these, but it comes in nice big clusters like floribundas tend to do. So this one I got from Heirloom Roses, and the foliage on it's pretty good. And in my trim back video, I did show that I left this one taller. So it is probably taller than I usually leave it, but it filled in pretty good, so I like how this came in. The reason I left this one taller in that video I mentioned was because it was trying to grab the light. It gets shaded by this rosemary behind it, so it was trying to get as much sun as possible, so I left it up taller, and it looks pretty good. This one next to Hot Cocoa is Love. This one I pruned back pretty much how I usually prune back my rose bushes, and it's filled in quite nice. And next to Love, I have a purple Veranda, and then next to that is Doris Day. Doris Day always performs, I think, very well. Another floribunda, lots of blooms on the same stem. And back over here in the corner on the wall, this is Pearly Gates. Pearly Gates did fill in pretty good. It's got a lot of green on it, kind of hiding the wall, and starting to bloom. And then Distant Drums. This one was the first one to bloom, so you can see a bunch of spent blooms, but the one that's blooming is showing its really nice coloring. And here I trimmed this one in my hard cutback video, or my winter cutback video this year, and you can see the difference, how it's filled in, and it's got a lot of clusters of blooms. It has not bloomed yet, so yeah, it filled in really good, and it's gonna bloom here shortly. And back over here I have some more vines. This one is Joseph's Coat. It's blooming, most of its blooms are above the wall, again trying to get to the sun, and not as many blooms down here on the wall itself where it's shaded in too much shade. You can also see these red blooms. This one has been blooming for a while now. This was one of the first to bloom in the garden. This one is Don Juan. This one's a newer vine, but I think this one took off really well for me here in Phoenix. It's put on a lot of growth. You can see again, like Joseph's coat, it's trying to grow up where the sun shines. And I had a bunch of clusters and blooms, and they've lasted a good amount of time. These ones have been open. You can see this bloom's probably not in the best shape. It's been open for some time, but it's stayed, it hasn't fallen, shattered yet. So it's got a long blooming life, and it puts on a lot of buds, and it grows really tall. So this one's a pretty hardy vine that I do suggest for Phoenix. And growing up next to it is another vine that I have. This one is Graham Thomas, I think. Graham Thomas, yeah, this is a David Austin rose. It's cupped. It's got a very strong, unique scent. This one, if you can tell, has not taken off as well as Don Juan. In fact, you can see Don Juan's almost growing into Graham Thomas, but it is a pretty rose, but I don't think it's enjoyed the summers here in Phoenix as much. And over here, this orange one is really pretty. This is an Easy Does It rose by, I believe, Weeks. Kind of like a unique petal shape with the ruffles. And again, in this one, and I just trimmed this back as I normally would, so it's about the same height that it normally would be. And then behind it is another one that I left tall this year for the same reason. And this one is Falling in Love, sorry. There is Falling in Love's bloom. I love this bloom. I think it's so, I don't know, it looks magical to me. This is one of my older roses in the garden. It's looking pretty good. Again, I left this one taller, so you can see from the base kind of up, I've got a lot of canes, and they're a lot taller than I usually leave these after a hard cutback. But it grew in really good, still sturdy. And this showy tree rose I have here is a grandiflora called Twilight Zone. This one has a bunch of clusters like a floribunda, but they're supposed to be bigger, I guess, is the grandiflora name. Very nice. And then down here I have some ground cover roses. Again, I showed how I trimmed these in for the winter, and now they've filled in, so they're looking good. They're just starting to bloom. This coral one is a drift rose, and I did want to point out that you can tell it did get a little bit of powdery mildew, which isn't ideal, but it's not going to be an issue here in Phoenix when it starts to really warm up and dry out. And next to it I have Oklahoma, which this one has bloomed. This was one of the first to bloom, but again, I did get some powdery mildew on this one. It was a little tricky, I think, because in Phoenix you want to water, obviously, because usually it doesn't rain, but it did rain a little bit more than, well, a lot more than usual. Yeah, it doesn't have the best foliage right now, but again, it's going to dry up here when summer comes. Down here I have my little mini roses. Again, I cut these back to get them ready. I probably didn't do a full hard cut back on these or the ground cover ones, but I did take a fair amount off to get them ready. also it keeps them kind of the size that they are, kind of low to the ground in a cute little small bush. And here, this pink rose, I believe I showed this one where it wasn't as robust. It didn't have as much robust growth on it as the rest of the roses did. So I actually did not do a hard cut back. I did a light prune on this. The foliage looks pretty good for not having done a full hard cut back on it. And the blooms are very nice on this one. And this pink one over here, this one is Grande Dame. This one tends to get buggy, and I know it. And I did very well in the start of the year, spring, but I ran out of spray, and I just kept forgetting to get more. And this is kind of what I've got here now. You can see that the bugs really enjoy this one. And then usually where there are bugs, they tend to like spread out. So this is a different rose. This is St. Swithin. It's a climbing rose, and you can see the bugs have gotten to it as well. Here's another bloom on St. Swithin, Swithin, David Austin climbing rose. It's got a really pretty color and a very interesting pattern internally, but you can see it did get a little buggy. So this corner over here, I think the pink one really attracts the bugs, and then they kind of tend to spread out from here on. And you can kind of even see it here on the blue girl, although this bloom still looks really good. You can see. But overall, this bush looks pretty healthy. On the winter hard cut back, I did cut this one back more than I usually would to try and get it to grow a lot more new growth. And then over here, this one, this beautiful tree rose I have is Ketchup and Mustard. Even though this one is in the buggy corner, this one does really well. I don't think the pests get to it or bother it as much. And yeah, it's got a ton of blooms, very pretty. So this is the garden, the rose garden that I've got here in Phoenix. Again, if you want to learn how I kind of cut everything back, get everything ready in winter time, I do have that video up on my channel. I can also link it below. So it's kind of a good before and after comparison, and might give you ideas of how you want to trim some of your roses to get them to do, I guess, what you want. And if this video was helpful, please do give it a like and subscribe. Thank you.